Technology Policy, and Mark Metter, who has been nominated to the Federal Trade Commission. Congress has charged both the OSTP and the FTC with duties that affect the lives of millions of Americans. OSTP advises the President on federal science and technology policy. Michael Kratsios has a distinguished track record of ensuring America leads globally in emerging technologies. His previous tenure as U.S. Chief Technology Officer at OSTP during the first Trump administration was marked by efforts to advance artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and 5G technology. The story of the 21st century will be written by whichever nation can innovate the fastest. This generation's space race is unfolding with technologies invisible to the naked eye, where the winners and the losers will be separated by mere nanometers. What was once science fiction is now crucial to maintaining the United States' position as the world's leading economy. Technologies like this new chip I hold in the palm of my hand, the Mariana One Quantum Chip, are unlocking a new era of computing that will transform industries from healthcare to energy, solving problems that today's computers simply cannot. And I will note, by the way, Microsoft tells me this chip is worth $1 billion, so I very much hope I do not drop it, because my current employer is judgment-proof and $36 trillion in debt. This breakthrough is led by an American company and harnesses a new kind of matter to solve problems faster than ever before. I'd like to thank Senator Blackburn, who is advancing a reauthorization of quantum computing research programs, for her leadership on this. Advancements in quantum computing, AI, and cybersecurity will drive innovation, protect the nation, and create new industries. Now let me say a few words about the FTC, which protects American consumers from unfair and deceptive business practices and anti-competitive behavior. Mark Metter is well prepared to serve as a commissioner, and he should be confirmed. I look forward to hearing that he would pursue the FTC's mission with impartiality and with respect for the rule of law. As a former director of the Office of Policy Planning at the FTC, I have a deep respect for the dedicated professionals within the agency. I saw firsthand how principled leadership and a shared commitment to statutory limits can benefit free enterprise and economic opportunity. But I worry that today's FTC is a far cry from the agency I once knew. For 4 years under Lina Khan, the FTC prioritized activism over enforcement, disregarded statutory limits, and weaponized its authority in defiance of congressional intent. Consider a few troubling examples. The FTC has abused its enforcement powers to target political opponents of the Biden administration. It has attempted to impose competition rulemakings across entire industries, exceeding its legal mandate. It has destroyed documents, obstructing both congressional oversight and potential litigation. It has collaborated with European regulators to apply foreign laws that put American tech companies at a competitive disadvantage. It has sought to regulate artificial intelligence in a way that could chill free speech, and it has attempted to impose sweeping data privacy and security mandates without congressional approval. Each of these actions represents a departure from the FTC's historical role as a nonpartisan enforcer of consumer protection and competition law. Former Commissioner Christine Wilson's resignation underscored this crisis, and she cited former Chairwoman Khan's disregard for legal precedent and due process as key factors in I think that Chairman the FTC and its deep understanding of competition law, process. Must enforce laws as Congress designed, not engage in ideological experiments. I look forward to hearing from both of today's nominees, learning about their perspectives and understanding how they plan to advance the goals of their respective institutions. I now turn to Ranking Member Cantwell for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being a champion of Washington innovation. I love it. That's usually my job, and so love that we have the dual role here of cheerleading.
You wanna hold the $1 billion ship?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
If she drops it, it's not my fault.
I think we'll hold it together because, Mr. Chairman, collaboration, I believe, is the next phase of innovation, and we can talk about that with Mr. Cruz when we get to his segmentation. But I really do believe that the state of Washington is leading in innovation in many, many ways, and so we are very proud of that. We'd like to start, and obviously we're going to hear from our colleagues, but I will try to be short with my opening remarks. Mr. Metter, for the Federal Trade Commission, as you just mentioned, the Federal Trade Commission has a very big responsibility on antitrust enforcement, including the 5 years that you spent at the FTC. And I think you know that it's not just another regulatory agency. It's a frontline defender of very complex consumer marketplace issues. I read in your testimony that you really do believe it's about competition in the marketplace. I do too. I do too. I don't think we can talk enough around here about competition. And competition gets you great innovation, just like we just saw, and it also gets you the opportunity to help us grow our economy and lift more people into the middle class. But obviously, markets sometimes have anti-competitive practices and unfair or deceptive practices. And the FTC, I believe, is a critically important organization. Things like the COPPA rule that protects children's privacy. I saw my colleague here, but I think he stepped out. And its actions to block anti-competitive mergers resulting in high consumer prices, like the Kroger-Albertsons merger, which is a very big issue in the Pacific Northwest for farmers and consumers. And the litigation against PBMs. My colleague Chuck Grassley and I just reintroduced legislation on this. So with consumers facing increased prices for everything like food, prescription drugs, gasoline, I do believe it's the FTC's authority to examine business practices and make sure that there is not an artificial inflation of prices and holding businesses accountable when they do harm consumers or competitors. So the statistics are alarming. The FTC data shows that in 2023, consumers reported losing $10.4 billion to fraud, with a median loss of $500. This is money consumers don't have to spend on groceries or rent, and so I just can't even believe. One day at the airport, overheard a constituent talking about how her aunt had become exploited by an AI trick where she thought Kevin Costner was going to come to visit her, and she had shelled out tens of thousands of dollars to. Again, and when I brought this up to Facebook Meta, they basically said, oh yeah, that's the biggest thing going on now. I mean, with AI, you're just going to where that you know people have money. So why basically say your software is broke on your computer and you need to send me $100 to fix it when you could basically promise somebody that Kevin Costner is going to come to SeaTac and visit you, and you will pay them tens of thousands of dollars. So we definitely need an FTC to be the policeman on the beat and continue to make sure that these pressures facing consumers are addressed. So look forward to your conversation. Turning to the second nominees, Mr. Cruz, thank you for wanting to serve again in a capacity I think that you know very well. The CHIPS and Science Act, passed by strong bipartisan support from this committee, recognizes America's scientific enterprise and the foundation of the future. But obviously, there are many things that we need to do to continue to test bed next generation technologies. I'm a very big believer in that the private sector is the main engine of our innovation and capital markets, and that the United States, even being outsized by some countries, still is not really an issue if, in fact, we educate and skill the talent and can innovate faster than they can. So this notion of test beds and hubs and laboratory research, I will be asking you about in the Q&A part of our questions. These opportunities for us to play our part on the broader R&D issues is something I believe that the Office of Science and Technology is so critical to do. As President Trump nominee, you will be the chief scientist advising during this period of remarkable technology change. And I think that that is why the United States must keep a very fast innovation pace ahead of our competitors. Since you are no stranger, I know you'll know more about how to work those levers, but I do need to hear from you today that you will be forceful on the investments that we would like to see in innovation. I know that the Trump administration has said that they plan to slash the budget of the National Science Foundation by 2/3 while implementing sweeping layoffs. I think these are questions that we'll need to know the answer to. In my state, the University of Washington, obviously a big R&D institution, feels like it's continuing to help us uncover those important issues that benefit all sectors and increase America's competitive advantages. So I hope that, as my colleague brought up quantum, that we will be able to continue the National Quantum Initiative started under you in your administration. I was just looking up the quote that you gave when $625 million was awarded to various innovative hubs related to quantum out of the DOE budget. I was glad to see that you were very enthusiastic about the federal government playing a role on broad quantum R&D policies. But no doubt, we're in a global race. I know America's up to it. Look forward to asking you how we continue to make these investments together and collaborate on actually getting the science implemented. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell. I'd now like to recognize my friend and colleague from the great state of Tennessee, Senator Hagerty, to introduce Mr. Kratsios. Senator Hagerty, welcome to the Commerce Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cantwell. I want to thank you both for hosting this important confirmation hearing today. It's my great privilege today to introduce my friend, Michael Kratsios, who's President Trump's nominee to be the Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. The OSTP Director advises the President on key industries of the future, including artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 5G, advanced manufacturing, biotechnology, and more. Indeed, Michael and I worked closely together on 5G and our telecommunications infrastructure when I served in my previous role as U.S. Ambassador to Japan. Now more than ever, emerging technologies present us with immense opportunities to maintain America's global dominance. At such a critical time, we can't afford to make policy errors in Washington. That's exactly why we need a leader of Michael's caliber serving in this vital role. While AI has rapidly ascended to become one of America's most important policy priorities, Michael had the foresight to see this technology's potential nearly a decade ago, and he's been working tirelessly on the issue ever since. His impressive record of public service in the field of science and technology policy include his past service as Chief Technology Officer of the United States, as well as the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. In these roles and others, Michael's coordinated public-private partnerships and served as the architect of national strategies on AI and quantum technologies. After leaving public service, he served as Managing Director of Scale AI, helping it become one of the most valuable and well-respected privately held AI companies in the world. Michael's research outside of the government provided the first quantifiable evidence of how banned Chinese technologies were still being procured by state and local governments across the country. He also brought to light the significant risks posed by PRC-manufactured ship-to-shore cranes in American ports. America must remain the world leader in scientific and technological innovation. Our national security, our liberty, and our prosperity depend on it. Michael understands this mission, and that's why I wholeheartedly support his nomination. I want to thank my colleagues here today for giving Michael your deepest consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty. And now I'd like to recognize my dearest friend in the Senate and the great senator from the great state of Utah, Senator Mike Lee, to introduce his former staffer, Mr. Metter. Senator Lee, welcome back to the Commerce Committee.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Cruz, and Ranking Member Cantwell, and other members of the committee. It really is a great honor and pleasure to be back in front of the Commerce Committee today to introduce my friend, former valued member of my team, Mark Metter, who's been nominated by President Trump to serve on the Federal Trade Commission. I offer my wholehearted support for Mark, for whom I have great regard. It's also great to have him here with his family, his wife, Adrienne, and their 6 children, as well as Mark's parents. And I'll note parenthetically here that his oldest daughter, Constance, already has my pledged support when she runs for president in 2048. She's smart as a whip, along with the rest of them.
Where is she? Let's see the future president, right there, okay.
She's terrific. If confirmed, Mark will, I believe, honorably serve the American people as a member of the Federal Trade Commission. I say this for a number of reasons. First, he's an exceptionally talented lawyer. He's a trusted advocate and a true leader in the field of antitrust law. His career has been defined by his ability to navigate some of the most complex questions in antitrust law and consumer protection matters. From his time on my staff here in the Senate to the time that he spent at the Federal Trade Commission as a lawyer there and also as a lawyer in DOJ's antitrust division, Mark has served at the forefront of key consumer protection and antitrust issues. His vast wealth of experience with enforcement and policy in both public service and in private practice as well has positioned him to be uniquely qualified for this new role. Shortly after Mark first joined my staff in 2015, I became immediately impressed by his temperament, his judgment, and his expertise. He always approached issues based on the facts, based on the law, and with really sound judgment. Now, Mark actually had 2 stints working in my office, and during these many years, I relied on his sound understanding of antitrust law, but also I found Mark to be somebody on whom I could rely for advice on pretty much anything. And he consistently gave good advice. It's one of the reasons why, if confirmed, as a member of the Federal Trade Commission, he's going to be a consensus builder. He'll be someone around whom ideas can coalesce and opinions can form. His leadership was felt in the more than 20 subcommittee hearings for which he helped me prepare, involving some of the most significant antitrust topics, from mergers to anti-competitive conduct. His leadership and insight were invaluable. Mark has a proven track record and extensive experience in the practice of antitrust law, both inside and outside of government. Not only does he have experience working for the FTC and DOJ and also in the United States Senate, but he's found remarkable success in private practice. His success in private practice can be attributed to his rare ability to advise his clients not only on antitrust compliance and litigation, but also on policy dimensions of offensive and defensive antitrust strategies. And I would add here that it has been a tremendous benefit to him and to his clients, the fact that he's served as a lawyer both at DOJ and at FTC working on antitrust matters. His steady demeanor and temperament, coupled with his ability to blend legal experience with strategic policy insight, make him exceptionally qualified to serve as the next FTC commissioner. Mark will ensure that the antitrust and consumer protection laws are enforced in a fair and principled manner. I have every confidence in Mark, and I'm proud to be here in support of his nomination. I urge every member of this committee to vote in favor of Mark's nomination. I look forward to voting for him on the Senate floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lee. And you two are welcome to stick around, but you can also head on to other business if your schedule so demands. With that, recognize Mr. Kratsios for your opening statement.
Thank you, Senator Hagerty, for your generous introduction. And thank you, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, and other members of this esteemed committee for inviting me to appear before you today. Let me also give my thanks to my family, some of whom are in attendance, to my parents, John and Maria, my sister Katie, my brother-in-law Mark, and my beautiful wife Alyssa. Thank you. I could not have come this far without your love and encouragement. It is the honor of my lifetime to sit before this committee as President Donald J. Trump's nominee for Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy. In his second inaugural address, the President promised that his administration will work to usher in the golden age of America. I believe in that promise and will dedicate myself to fulfilling it. In the last Trump administration, as the 4th Chief Technology Officer of the United States and an Associate Director of OSTP, I led national initiatives on artificial intelligence and quantum information science. I promulgated budget priorities that led to the federal government doubling research and development spending in those areas. I drafted non-regulatory guidance for emerging technologies to give the public trust in how these technologies are developed and used. I saw firsthand how the actions that we took at OSTP could enable new industries to take hold and to deliver benefits to the American people. For a century, the United States has stood at the forefront of science and technology. We split the atom for war and for peace. We put man on the moon and brought him back again. And with a transistor and integrated circuit, we steered the globe into the digital age. Thanks to these breakthroughs, Americans have enjoyed unprecedented economic prosperity. We must preserve that inheritance to share with future generations and to ensure that the tools and the technologies that give shape to our world always help people live productive, meaningful lives. In recent years, other countries have sought to supplant the United States and claim science and technology leadership for themselves. In particular, China has emerged as both our preeminent geopolitical rival and our most formidable technological and scientific competitor. Central to this competition is a new frontier of scientific discovery that lies before us. The shape of future global order will be defined by whomever leads across AI, quantum, nuclear, and other critical and emerging technologies. Chinese progress in nuclear fusion, quantum technologies, and autonomous systems all press home the urgency of the work ahead. As President Trump has said, as our global competitors race to exploit these technologies, it is a national security imperative for the United States to achieve and maintain unquestioned and unchallenged global technological dominance. The Office of Science and Technology Policy will be critical to this effort in advising the President and coordinating the national initiatives needed to rise to the challenge and deliver to the American people. I'm committed to American leadership in emerging technologies and to ensuring that all Americans benefit from scientific and technological breakthroughs. As director, I will build a deep bench of policy experts to ensure that the President and that the White House have the necessary technical advice to meet the challenges of our moment. If we are to lead the world in science and technology for the next century, to continue to provide for the American citizenry, to enhance our national security, to imprint the future with American character and improve the welfare of all mankind, the only way to do so will be to double down on what has made our history of innovation so great, the uniquely American free market approach to scientific discovery, which harnesses the combined strength of government, industry, and academia. With your support, this administration will usher in a golden age of American innovation. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kratsios. Mr. Metter.
Thank you, Chairman Cruz, Ranking Member Cantwell, and members of the Senate Commerce Committee. It was a pleasure meeting with several of you and your staff over the past weeks, and it is an honor to be with you all today. I'm humbled by the trust and confidence President Trump has placed in me to serve as a commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission and to help implement his agenda to improve the lives of American families. Thank you for this opportunity to serve our country. Thank you also, Senator Lee, for your very kind introduction, your unfailing support and friendship, and the opportunity to serve as your antitrust counselor not once, but twice. Your example of leadership has provided a model of public service that I will strive to emulate my entire career. Before offering some brief remarks, I would like to recognize several people who have joined me here today. First and foremost is my best friend, confidant, and devoted wife, Adrienne, who has joined me along with our 6 children, Constance, who's 13, Ross, who's 12, Ambrose, who is 10, Veronica, who's 8, Silas, who's 6, and John, who's 3. Many people have heard me say, by the way, I'm impressed that I remembered all of those. That was my goal for the day. Yes, that makes it easier, actually. Many people have heard me say that working in the Senate was the best job I ever had. But truth be told, even if I'm confirmed to this position, caring and providing for the 7 people seated behind me will always be my best and most important job. Last but far from least, I'm also joined today by my parents, Brad and Elise Metter, to whom I owe more than time permits me to recount. After my faith in Christ, the greatest gift my parents gave me was a childhood marked by unconditional love and a dedication to others. After growing up the son of a nomadic Army officer, my dad prioritized stability for our family. He turned down other jobs to continue his career with the United States Postal Service, and always made sure there was time to teach me to golf or accompany me on camping trips. My mom was always there for us when we got home from school, even while working part-time to make ends meet, and yet somehow also found time to open a soup kitchen at our church. Thank you both for teaching me the value of service and how to be a loving and present father and husband for my own family. These examples of hard work and sacrifice were deeply formative for me and solidified my decision to embark on a career of public service. As many of you know, I've worked as a federal antitrust enforcer and policy advisor, including at the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division and here in the Senate. And if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed to this position, I'll be returning home to where I began my career, the Federal Trade Commission. To do so would be the honor of a lifetime. The FTC plays a critical role in protecting American consumers. Its twin missions, to stop unfair methods of competition and to protect consumers, have arguably never been more important. President Trump is correct that America is facing an affordability crisis. Our free market system is the bedrock of the American economy, and yet many Americans feel that it is no longer working for them or to their benefit. They value hard work and free enterprise, but at times feel that honest competition has been replaced by concentrated economic powers that take them for granted. A truly free market, however, requires the availability of meaningful choices for consumers. This includes the benefit of vibrant competition that leads to lower prices and higher quality. It also means acknowledging that Americans are not just consumers. They are mothers and fathers, neighbors and friends. Protecting competition in all of our markets is essential to ensuring that America's free market economy operates as our servant, not our master. At the same time that American families are struggling to make ends meet, fraudulent and deceptive practices threaten not just their wealth, but the well-being of their children and loved ones. Unscrupulous actors seek to profit off our children by exploiting their privacy, innocence, and vulnerability. Chairman Cruz put it especially well when he remarked that today's families face a challenge previous generations could not imagine, a rapidly changing digital environment targeting our kids. Parents struggle to navigate the maze of putatively free services and social media sites that impose hidden but growing costs on their children's mental health and safety. One of the FTC's most important missions in the years to come will be using its Consumer Protection Authority to safeguard families from those seeking to take advantage of the most vulnerable. If confirmed, I will work to ensure that the FTC's precious enforcement resources are focused on the cases most needed to protect consumers and move the law in the right direction, not wasted on pet projects that risk making bad law or distract from addressing real threats to American consumers. FTC enforcement decisions should be based on the facts and the law should be vigorously and fairly enforced. America needs an FTC that is focused on law enforcement, provides clear guidance, and ensures the public's trust in the agency. And FTC staff need leaders who work alongside them, not just over them. The challenges facing our economy are great, but so is our resolve. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as a commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission, I look forward to working with Chairman Ferguson and my fellow commissioners to help American consumers by fighting to protect the competitive process that keeps markets free and the families that give value to our freedom. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you to you both. Your backgrounds are remarkable. Mr. Kratsios, let's start with you. Mr. Kratsios, during the first Trump administration, you served as the U.S. Chief Technology Officer and as the third highest ranking official at the U.S. Department of Defense. Mr. Metter, you bring extraordinary experience, not only from your time at the FTC, but also from your tenure at the Department of Justice and the Antitrust Division and your work in the Senate as a recidivist, twice going to work for Mike Lee. Mr. Kratsios, please tell the committee, why do you want to be the director of the Office of Science Technology Policy?
I deeply believe that it is critically important for our nation to lead the world in emerging technologies. These are technologies like AI, like quantum, like advanced telecommunications that will power our economy, ensure our long-term national security. And if there is one agency within the government that can help in this mission, it is OSTP. It's an organization that was established to coordinate all the disparate science and technology equities across the government. I'm familiar with how the agency operates, and I believe that I can do a very great job in driving these initiatives across government.
Now, as Chief Technology Officer during the first Trump administration, you played a key role in freeing up a significant amount of federal spectrum for 5G through the AMBIT process. Do you expect that this administration will again push for freeing up spectrum for commercial use?
I think it's critically important to always be looking at ways that we can better utilize the spectrum that is currently being occupied by various government agencies. And the process that we're able to show in the AMBIT process is that if you bring the right technologists to bear on these problems, we can find a way that can benefit both the national security interests of the United States and the commercial interests. So I think it is very possible to be done, and I think we just have to bring to bear the great science and technologists at OSTP to help solve the critical technical problems or technical challenges associated with freeing up some of this spectrum.
And given your experience as a senior leader at the Defense Department, would you agree that it is technologically possible to free up spectrum without compromising national security?
I think it's proven that it can be done. It's been done before. And I think if we get the right minds together in a room, I think these are the types of problems that we can solve collectively.
Terrific. Mr. Metter, during the nomination hearing for Commissioners Ferguson and Holyoke, I noted the challenges posed by evolving markets and emerging technologies. I've long thought the actions of big tech and our reliance on such companies may raise both consumer protection and antitrust concerns. I was very pleased to see Chairman Ferguson issue a request for information last week, seeking public comment regarding technology platform censorship. He highlighted that current actions by tech platforms may violate their own terms of service in violation of Section 5 of the FTC Act. Mr. Metter, how should the FTC address the challenges posed by emerging technologies and big tech?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the FTC has taken the first step, which is to collect all of the facts. Before we can make any enforcement decision, we need to know the marketplace reality. And so reaching out to consumers to hear about their experiences is the very first thing we need to do. After that, it's a matter of looking at the facts under the law to see whether there has been, in the case of a consumer protection matter, some act of an unfair practice or deception of consumers. And so I'm confident that with this first step of collecting information, the FTC is off to the right start. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I look forward to working with Chairman Ferguson and the other commissioners to look at this issue very closely.
Would you agree that the FTC has ample tools to address the challenge of big tech censorship? And I have long said that I think big tech censorship poses the single greatest threat to free speech and free and fair elections in this country. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do, Chairman. I believe that the FTC has a lot of tools at its disposal currently, and the first thing that it can do is to undertake an examination of the market through that lens to see what tools we have available to address the harms that we identify in the marketplace. Should we encounter some harm that can't be solved with the tools that FTC has today, I would be happy to work with your office and other members of the committee to discuss what the path forward might be for additional tools to solve that problem.
Mr. Kratsios, at OSTP, you played a pivotal role in advancing the United States' AI strategy, and you helped establish many of the tenets put in place under the 2020 National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Act. But some of those tenets were abused by the Biden administration. The first Trump administration's AI initiative emphasized NIST's role in developing basic measurement standards for AI. Under President Biden, NIST used authorities granted by the AI Initiative Act to develop standards for evaluating supposed AI risks, and I put that in quote, such as bias and misinformation. Testing standards became a Trojan horse for progressive social policies. In January 2025, President Trump issued a new AI executive order in which he directed OSTP to develop an AI action plan. The President knows the United States must avoid the European model of premature regulation, something Vice President J.D. Vance also emphasized in his speech at the Paris AI Summit the other week. How did the previous administration deviate from the AI strategy that you put in place? And how do you anticipate that the Trump administration will build on your past work to ensure American leadership and dominance in AI?
I look forward to, if confirmed, working on the AI action plan with other members of the White House and the interagency. The most important thing when you think about applying an AI strategy across the agencies is to think very carefully and critically about what the individual missions of the various agencies are and align the policy actions associated with the strategy to the mission. With regards to NIST, for example, NIST has a long bipartisan history of being an agency that does measurement science. And the work associated with any AI initiative should be in the light of that. It should be focused on measurement science. So to me, I look forward to working with a wide variety of agencies that would be involved in driving this AI action plan. But most critically, and I think through the lens that I would be looking through all of this through, is understanding what the strengths are of individual agencies and making sure that how they contribute to the larger strategy aligns with that rather than deviating from it.
Thank you. Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Chair Cruz and Ranking Member Cantwell. And thank you both to Mr. Mader and Mr. Kratsios for being here. I'd like to start with a few questions for Mr. Mader. I appreciated our meeting yesterday, and we discussed protecting consumers is at the heart of the Federal Trade Commission's work. I shared with you in our meeting that I've received an overwhelming outreach from my constituents, from calls and emails. We had a town hall yesterday with over 1,000 folks, and many of them are concerned and some are just afraid that Elon Musk and Doge are accessing their personal data from their Social Security numbers to tax records. Not only are they concerned about people accessing this, but what they will use it for. As a consumer protection enforcer, what responsibility do you think the FTC has to monitor Doge with regards to sensitive and private consumer data?
Thank you, Senator. I enjoyed our conversation as well. It's good to be with you again. So as I mentioned at the time, there are laws the FTC enforces, and there are also laws to which the FTC is subject. And in the latter category is included confidentiality protection. So when I was a staff attorney practicing antitrust law, we would collect information from third parties as part of the investigation, and we were required to keep that confidential. And that's very important so that businesses can trust that when they come to the FTC and share information as a witness to help our investigations, that it won't be leaked. Those cover the other side of the FTC as well on consumer protection matters, and so the agency has an obligation to keep all of the confidential information that it collects private and within the agency. I can't speak to what the internal plans or practices are for Doge, but I can commit that if confirmed this position, I would ensure the FTC is following the laws that it enforces as well as the laws that restrict it.
Thank you. Yesterday, we also discussed our shared concern over pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. As we discussed, PBMs contribute to inflated drug costs for Americans and play an outsized role in the drug supply chain at the expense of consumers. In the House, I was able to co-lead a bipartisan effort to rein in PBMs and want to continue to do that in the Senate. Will you commit to supporting continued work at the FTC to investigate PBMs and take necessary enforcement actions?
Thank you. I was fortunate to begin my career at FTC in the healthcare division, and so this is an area of the economy I care deeply about, and is really one of those kitchen table issues that people pay close attention to. And if confirmed, yes, I'm committed to ensuring we have competitive markets in the healthcare space and using all of the agency's tools in furtherance of that mission.
Thank you. Mr. Kratsios, in your 2019 confirmation hearing, you said workforce development must be at the heart of everything we do at the Office of Science, Technology, Policy. Do you still believe this?
I do, yes.
So I'm laser focused on preparing the workforce for jobs of today and the future. I was Secretary of Labor in Delaware. I started a bipartisan future work caucus in the House. And especially when we look at things like biotech and AI and quantum. As director of OSTP, would you prioritize strategies to increase our emerging tech workforce, and if so, how?
Absolutely. Whenever I think about how you structure a national strategy around emerging tech, it typically falls on 4 pillars. One is R&D, one is on regulations, one is on international, and the 4th pillar is always workforce. And within the federal government, there's lots of levers that you can use to drive those efforts. It can be through grants and fellowships to researchers, and it can also be through lots of other programs to allow for training and reskilling. So I'm a big advocate and would be delighted to work with you on those issues.
Great. Much of the work is outside of government, but I am concerned about the mass firings of scientists and engineers at NIH and NIST. Does that concern you? And do you think that the hollowing out of the federal government for this technical talent risks losing ground to economic competitors like China?
I think it's very important when you enter into a new administration to have the opportunity to assess the team that you have on the field and determine what is the best way to be able to drive the priorities of the American people and the president. And I think it's very natural and common sense and logical to do that evaluation. And what I have observed from the outside is that these considerations of employment are ones that are not specifically targeted to science and technology, but are broad across all the agencies. So I think it's an important and necessary step to take when you start a new administration.
My time has expired, but I will submit some questions for the record, Mr. Chair. And one of which is I wanted to know if you believe there is bias in AI or has been bias in AI. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of our nominees here today. I enjoyed meeting with both of you before this hearing, so thank you for coming into my office and having a good discussion. Mr. Kratsios, I welcome your enthusiasm for advancing American leadership on emerging technologies. As you know, OSTP is responsible for coordinating science and tech policy among federal agencies. When you were the United States Chief Technology Officer, one of your focuses was advancing DoD's unique testing authorities to drive innovation. And at the time, you stated that the Department of Defense is at the forefront of cutting-edge 5G testing and experimentation. Do you still believe that?
I do, yes.
And when it comes to 5G and other spectrum matters, do you believe that DoD testing should be faithfully integrated into a national spectrum policy?
Yes, DoD is a critical component of the spectrum strategy.
If you're confirmed to be director of OSTP, your role will still be influential on national spectrum policy, even though it may be smaller compared to other agencies. Previously, I understood you were involved with America's Midband Initiative team, known as AMBIT, and you brought that up a couple times yesterday in our discussion. And so I looked into it a little bit more to familiarize myself with it. And that was an auction off mid-band spectrum held by DoD, and it was to make those licenses available to wireless companies. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did AMBIT auction, did that cause more congestion for defense systems operating in that lower 3 band?
In my opinion, I think AMBIT provided an opportunity for a technical analysis of that spectrum range and find a way to be able to still complete the national security mission by moving some of the workloads that were in the auction band to lower bands.
So they had to compress that band even more then in order to accommodate that into the lower 3, is that correct?
Yeah, so some of the activities that were in the band that ultimately were auctioned were moved down to lower bands.
Are you familiar, first of all, I understand that AMBIT struggled on the back end with major relocation costs from the defense systems that were displaced in that process of compressing them. Is that correct?
I haven't tracked the details of that since I left office, but there's always transition costs associated with freeing up bands typically.
Are you familiar with any of the costs? Are those readily available so we can access those? Do you know how that cut into the net revenue that was expected from the auction?
I'm not familiar with those details, but I can try to see what's publicly available.
That would be great. Mr. Meador, over the years, the Federal Trade Commission has faced off in court against the deepening pockets of major corporations, especially when it comes to big tech. If confirmed, how would you prioritize litigation and effectively use agency resources in upholding the FTC's mission?
Thank you. That's a very important topic. I will say the FTC staff have gotten very good at doing a lot with often much less. If confirmed, my first step will be to consult with the chairman and the commissioners and, of course, the staff to understand what challenges they are facing, what do we have on our docket, and what resources do we have available and then work collaboratively with all of them to determine which cases are the highest priority to protect the largest number of consumers from the gravest threats.
It's my understanding that at times there can be tension with that enforcement coordination with the Department of Justice. Do you have any comments on that, or if that would occur, what would you do?
Sure. Yeah, this is something that has happened frequently in the past. Some of it has unfortunately been very public. I'm confident that President Trump has selected leaders for this administration who can work very well together. I think it is of paramount importance that both agencies be singing from the same hymn sheet, be aligned on policy and enforcement decisions, and there should really be no daylight between them when it comes to how they're enforcing the antitrust laws. I think anything is possible if you don't care who gets the credit. And so when it comes to merger clearance, we should be focusing on protecting consumers as fast as possible, not trying to get one up on the other agency.
Thank you both for putting yourselves forward to serve in these very dangerous times that we live in. I really appreciate it, and thank you to your families as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Bipartisan Chips and Science Act authorized one of the largest investments in our nation's history into public research and development. These investments will help ensure the United States remains a global leader in innovation for critical and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Unfortunately, it has been reported that the Trump administration is considering reducing the National Science Foundation, their annual budget, by up to 66%. And I believe this would be a disastrous step backwards in the international race to invest in and develop these technologies. So, Mr. Kratsios, do you support the bipartisan investments that have been made under the Chips and Science Act?
I generally have for many years supported the important role that federally funded early-stage basic pre-competitive research plays in the ecosystem.
So is that a yes as far as the Chips and Science Act?
I think components of the Chips and Science Act are extremely important for ensuring U.S. leadership in semiconductors and the broader AI ecosystem.
Okay. Do you think it would be wise to reduce the budget of the National Science Foundation and cut back on these critical investments in research and development?
I can't speak necessarily to the top line of the National Science Foundation budget.
Well, 66% is what we've heard floated.
So I'll defer to the president and OMB as they decide those top lines. But to me, I think what's important is, in some sense, the absolute number, but more importantly, how the dollars that actually are budgeted and ultimately appropriated are spent, and prioritizing them in areas of national interest. When I served as the U.S. CTO in the last administration, even in constrained budget environments, we spent a lot of time trying to ensure that we're prioritizing investments in the areas that were most critical for the future of American prosperity.
But you wouldn't rule out a 66% cut in NSF funding?
I would defer again to the process that the president and OMB are going to lead.
Thank you. We know that in order to remain a global leader, we need our best and our brightest, regardless of their gender, their race, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, to be on the front lines in these research careers. That is why the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act requires OSTP to develop and publicize guidance to federal laboratories and universities on best practices to help identify any institutional barriers that limit the recruitment, retention, and advancement of women and underrepresented minorities in STEM research careers. So, Mr. Kratsios, do you believe President Trump's executive order ending DEI programs contradicts this bipartisan law? And do you commit to executing this OSTP directive in the law, even if you're directed by President Trump not to?
I do not believe that the DEI executive order is in conflict with the law. I have for many years and will continue to advocate for all Americans to be able to pursue STEM degrees. In my opinion, there are not enough Americans pursuing advanced degrees in STEM, and it would be my priority, and if I was to be confirmed, to try to get as many Americans as possible to go back into the STEM fields.
Thank you. Mr. Medor, I really appreciate your taking the time last week to stop by to discuss some of the critical issues that are before the Federal Trade Commission. In our meeting, we discussed our shared concerns around the market consolidation in the healthcare industry. I appreciated hearing from you about your perspectives on private equity's acquisition of hospitals, physician groups, and nursing homes. Can you share with the committee what role you believe the Federal Trade Commission has in the interest of healthcare quality and costs?
Thank you for raising that topic. The FTC plays a critical role in its antitrust enforcement duties to ensure that our markets remain competitive. That includes both preventing anti-competitive conduct, but also policing mergers to ensure there's not undue consolidation within any individual market. There, it's important to look at the competitive effects of a merger regardless of who's purchasing it, to ensure that in the aftermath, we're going to have a competitive status quo, that competition will be maintained so that all healthcare providers feel that need to continue to provide better quality services to the patients.
I thank you. Since I only have 20 seconds left, Mr. Kratsios, you may answer this either here or for the record. You come to this role with significant prior experience with artificial intelligence. With respect to healthcare, I want to know what role you believe AI has in our healthcare systems, and what, if any, guardrails you think should be in place.
I think one of the greatest and most impactful applications of artificial intelligence will be in the world of healthcare, from drug discovery to the way that we operate our healthcare institutions. So there's a tremendous opportunity both at places like HHS and in the private sector to make an impact.
Thank you. Senator Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Meador, in the waning days of the Biden administration, the FTC noticed two proposed rulemakings regarding earnings claims. These rules unfairly targeted the direct selling industry, which is a large industry in Utah, represents 38,000 jobs, $2.7 billion of statewide earnings. But more important, an industry that I know from firsthand observation works diligently to obey all the laws, to stay within all the parameters, and yet frequently finds themselves attacked by bureaucrats. So my question for you is, can you commit to voting against implementing the two proposed rules?
Thank you, Senator. Well, I can't commit to any specific vote should I be confirmed. I can tell you that if I am confirmed, I will work with staff to get up to speed on that issue and approach it with an open mind.
Good, and I appreciate and understand that. So I'm going to rephrase what you said with a little more emphasis and see if you can say yes to this. Can you commit to giving full and fair consideration to their concerns of the direct selling industry and what they have about these two proposed rulings?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and it's very important to these companies to get it right and to be able to also just to have that audience to be able to explain their perspective. Thank you. Mr. Kratsios, if I pronounce that wrong, you're probably used to that, I'm sorry. Thank you for coming by my office. The Director of Office of Science and Technology Policy will have a seat on the President Trump's National Energy Dominance Council. We talked about that. What do you see as OSTP's role on this council, and how will you leverage that role to push forward new energy technologies?
I think on that council, one of our primary missions, I guess first and foremost, is to provide important technological and scientific advice to the rest of the council members. I think what OSTP can also advocate for are new and emerging ways, new and emerging technologies that can be used in achieving energy dominance, things like small modular reactors. And it's something that I look forward to, if confirmed, building out a team to help support.
Excellent. And I would love you to come see in person Utah's innovation in this field, and I think they're doing some amazing things. If you get a chance, well, come see us in Utah.
Thank you. I'd love to.
Yeah. A second question, when we met, we talked about your interest in this intersection between national security and technology. Unsurprisingly, our greatest rival is China. What would be the national security implications of China leading in emerging technologies, and how would you advise the President on the best policy approach to ensure the U.S. leadership in these technologies?
I think first and foremost, we have to make a priority to drive U.S. leadership in these critical fields, which I think the president has done. The next step is actually being able to execute and bring to bear the totality of the American innovation ecosystem, which is the federal government, the private sector, and academia working together to develop these new technologies, both sort of from discovery all the way to fielding them. I think one area that is also very important is taking technologies that have proven very successful and sort of represent American dominance in the field, take, for example, large language models, and actually making the step to apply those to the critical national security missions that we have at the DoD and in the IC. It would be a shame if we're able to lead in these technologies, but we're not actually fielding them in support of the warfighter. So I think there is a lot of work to be done, both in maintaining our leadership in things like AI, but also fielding those technologies in government itself as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. Appreciate both of your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here today. Mr. Metter, when we met in my office, we discussed the importance of an independent FTC. Unfortunately, the current administration is undermining that independence by refusing to defend the Supreme Court's 90-year-old decision in Humphrey's executor. In that decision, the Supreme Court held that FTC commissioners and members of other bipartisan independent agencies can only be fired for a cause. My office sent over the text of Humphrey's executor letter to Congress from the acting Solicitor General stating that the administration would no longer defend the constitutionality of certain for-cause removal protections, and a statement from Chair Ferguson that he agrees with the acting Solicitor General's position. Did you receive that information?
Thank you, sir. I received it late last night, yes.
Did you have a chance to review them?
In brief, I did.
Appreciate that. Do you agree with the Solicitor General's position?
So, Senator, I thank you for bringing up this important topic. I can't weigh in too much on the substance, given that it's the subject of ongoing litigation involving the FTC, but I think I can share some additional thoughts. I agree with some of the scholarship of Justice Elena Kagan on this. She's written about presidential administration and made the observation that direct presidential control of federal agencies increases democratic accountability. I believe on November 5th, the American people gave a very clear signal that they want greater accountability in how the federal government is administered, and that is what led to the election of President Trump. And I can commit that if confirmed to this position, that I will work to serve the American people, and will do so by advancing the agenda of the president that they elected.
Mr. Metter, can you repeat again why you can't answer that question?
The underlying legal question, Senator, is subject to ongoing litigation in which the FTC is involved, and so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to weigh in on that.
Appreciate that. So is it appropriate for Mr. Ferguson to weigh in?
I would defer to Chairman Ferguson on that.
But you believe that you should not because it's currently before the courts.
I believe
and you stand strong behind that.
It is inappropriate for me as a nominee to weigh in on pending litigation involving.
If you were an FTC commissioner, would it be appropriate for you to weigh in?
I would have to consult with the Office of General Counsel. I expect they would likely reach a similar conclusion, but I haven't asked them that question from the standpoint of a confirmed commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, you're a legal scholar. I am not. I'm a layperson. I think that answers the question resoundingly, and I very much appreciate that clarification. Mr. Metter, if you're confirmed and the Supreme Court overturns Humphrey's executor, how are you going to maintain your independence?
Senator, I view this question as having the same answer regardless of how the legal proceedings play out. My understanding is that the president has nominated me to serve the American people, and regardless of how the court decides these matters, I will show up each day to serve the American people by working to enforce the law fully and fairly.
Do you believe the FTC should be independent?
Senator, I will defer to the courts and Congress and the president on the resolution of that matter. I view my job as a narrowly focused one on enforcing the law to the best of my ability.
And it speaks for itself. The previous administration, the FTC's, with their work, with their mission with PBM, I think that there was a question asked by Lisa Blunt-Rochester in this space. Will you commit to continuing the important work of holding PBMs accountable with their practices?
Thank you. Yes, as I mentioned for Senator Blunt-Rochester, this is a very important topic, and I'm glad to see the interest in it among the committee members. If confirmed, I can absolutely commit to ensuring we're enforcing the competition laws across the entire healthcare space.
Last Congress, I pressed Merck's CEO to ensure that they wouldn't play patent games when the primary patent for their cancer drug, Keytruda, comes up. He agreed that they wouldn't for the intravenous version of the drug, but soon after came out the subcutaneous version of the drug, which you may be aware is between the skin and the muscle. So it tries to get below all the skin, but right above the muscle. A blatant example of the games companies play called product hopping. What will you do at the FTC to address these uncompetitive practices?
Thank you. This was a topic I had I wouldn't say the fortune, since we don't like to see anti-competitive conduct, but I had the experience of working on these matters as an attorney in the healthcare division. And if confirmed, I will be working with that staff and the other commissioners very closely to ensure that we're enforcing the law to its fullest extent.
Mr. Kratsios, yes or no, do you believe the national labs are critical to our nation's scientific research and technological advancement, including supporting our nation's energy future and ensuring our national security?
I do. I have for many years been a fierce advocate of our DOE lab system.
Do you see a role for the national labs in using AI for national security risk assessment?
I think the DOE already does that, and I think they should continue to do that work.
You previously testified on the importance of quantum as a key industry of the future. Do you support the reauthorization of the National Quantum Initiative Act to help advance American leadership in quantum?
I was a big advocate of the initial passing of the bill, and I would love to work with this committee again to see if we can get it reauthorized.
Appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, just a little sidebar there. I remember asking a question about quantum computing. It may have been in a skiff, and the individual that was presenting to us at the time said that they should not answer the question on quantum because it's classified. I then held up a copy of Fortune magazine, which that issue decided to cover quantum. So it's just refreshing to be able to have that conversation in this committee. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Well, and I agree that far too much is classified that you can read in the newspaper. I will say also to my friend from New Mexico who raised good questions, I do not have any of the constraints the nominee has, and so I'm happy to answer your question, which is that I think Humphrey's executor was wrongly decided and should be overruled. As I read Article 2, all executive power is vested in the President of the United States. And I would note this is a similar exchange that this committee had with Secretary Howard Lutnick, where some members of the committee were surprised that Secretary Lutnick, appointed by President Trump, was going to work to implement the president's agenda. And I would suggest that's not a surprising thing. I would expect President Trump's nominees to work to implement his agenda, just as President Biden's nominees worked to implement his agenda, as did President Obama's and every president we've had. And the beauty of our constitutional structure is the president is democratically accountable to the people. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, I appreciate your commitment to working in the public interest. Let me start off with Mr. Kratsios. In your role as director of OSTP, you'll be responsible for working with various advisory bodies, the President's Council on Advisors in Science and Technology, PCAST, the National Science and Technology Council. Obviously, I am on Maslow's hierarchy of science, a geologist is near the bottom. But I am a scientist, have published peer-reviewed research, and I think it's important that we make sure that science remains impartial, objective, and nonpartisan. So we need to make sure that our scientific enterprise is examined and re-examined and continues to be modified to be more successful in those essential needs of our country. If you're confirmed, how do you commit to, or can you commit to, ensuring OSTP works with the scientific community's voice, that the scientific community is fairly represented and their voice is truly uplifted?
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. I think to me, one of the most important goals that I even mentioned in my opening statement was to ensure that the team that we build at OSTP is representative of a wide variety of scientists and technologists that support the important policy priorities of the president. So in any administration, OSTP starts with very few people on the team, and the next year is spent finding the best scientists and technologists from across your agency to bring into the White House to work with the agency. So I commit to doing that, and I think it's critically important that any policy process that is around the White House is informed by high-quality, sound science, and that is something I look forward to bringing to bear on what we do at the White House.
Great. Well, that's something we will support you on as it gets complicated, as I'm sure it will. Mr. Metter, a national privacy law would require a great amount of oversight to be able to hold businesses accountable. Sometimes these are very large businesses with immense capability. state attorneys general have experienced investigative teams that cover a range of consumer protection laws. Do you believe it's appropriate for state AGs to help the FTC enforce a federal privacy law, especially if that federal law preempts state laws? So why or why not?
Thank you, Senator. I believe that's ultimately a decision for Congress to make at the time that it would pass a federal privacy law to put structures in there governing coordination with state AGs. I can say that on the antitrust side of FTC, there's been very productive relationships between state AGs and the FTC. And so hopefully, should Congress give the agency additional powers in that area, we would see equally productive relationships there.
Right. In terms of recognizing the immense power of these very large companies and what we've seen with the social platforms and in many cases the lack of any ability of government to curtail some of the things we recognize, or I mean some of the deep fake pornography, that's one example that comes up. How do you think we should be looking at AI on that within that same context of being able to get the market to have some balance?
Yes, that's an incredibly important topic that I think is only going to increase in prominence in the coming years. I think the first step is to view it through the lens of our existing enforcement authorities. So the FTC has the ability to police unfair and deceptive practices, and we know that AI is already being used to turbocharge many of those acts. And so it will be incumbent upon the FTC to keep a close eye on that activity to make sure we're not letting anything slip through the cracks. And should we become aware of something that we're not able to address with existing authorities, to consult with you and other members of the committee to make sure that that's resolved.
Great. And then the last thing, we talked a little bit in our office about the importance of markets being balanced, and how sometimes it's government, sometimes it's private industry, but everybody's trying to distort markets when it's to their advantage. Last week, FTC Chair Ferguson announced the agency will maintain the 2023 joint merger guidelines with the DOJ, with the Department of Justice. And these guidelines outline the criteria for the FTC to consider as it looks at mergers and acquisitions. A lot of these decisions have direct effect on the markets themselves. How can the FTC ensure we maintain fair competition in markets as we keep a forward-looking vision?
That's a great question. I really enjoyed our conversation. I thought you made several excellent points about the need to balance the prevention of anti-competitive conduct with not going too far to burdening markets with too much intervention. And I think that has to remain at the forefront of every enforcement decision that the FTC takes, looking to ensure that they're actually improving the lives of consumers when they do act, but not going so far as to micromanage the economy in any area.
I appreciate that. I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulations to our nominees. I'm very excited about your service and doing some good together. Mr. Kratsios, thanks for taking some time to visit with me a number of days ago. And in that meeting, we discussed the critical importance of emerging technologies to our national security and our economic competitiveness. We discuss the CHIPS and Science Act. You know that's important to me as the Republican co-lead of that effort. I'm still focused, as I indicated to you in that meeting, on achieving through the CHIPS program office, further reshoring and onshoring of our semiconductor manufacturing base. And you offered me reassurances about those efforts should you be confirmed. I just want to ask you to commit on the record to honoring existing CHIPS agreements to ensure stability for this growing industry as we work to further implement this program.
The specifics of those agreements, I'll have to defer to Secretary Lutnick in Commerce, but while I will certainly commit to, if confirmed, is working very closely with the Secretary and with the larger interagency on sort of the two-pronged goal of being able to reshore the critical fabrication of high-end semiconductors to the United States, and part two, creating the R&D ecosystem necessary to continue to be the world leader in the design of these chips.
Great, and I trust that Secretary Lutnick will be following congressional directives and intent, and look forward to working with him on those efforts. You played a role, Mr. Kratsios, a key role in AI policy in the first Trump administration. I would expect in this different capacity, you'll continue to play an important role. You played a very important role in the February 2019 executive order on maintaining American leadership in AI. If confirmed, do you plan to build on this work, and if so, in what way?
Absolutely. I think that was the first executive order ever signed by a president on artificial intelligence. That was signed by President Trump in February of 2019. I think the core crux of that executive order is the necessity for a whole-of-government approach to achieving sustained American leadership in AI. We have to lead the world in artificial intelligence R&D. We have to lead the world in creating a regulatory environment that allows our artificial intelligence companies to grow and succeed in the U.S. We have to create an environment where our workforce can actually thrive and take advantage of this new technology. And the last pillar is around international engagement, of how we can work with like-minded partners to ensure that U.S. AI becomes the default AI of the world versus some of our adversaries.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer. There's a welcome and I think important emphasis by certain incoming members of the administration on making sure that we don't unduly throttle innovation as it relates to AI and that we encourage deployment. Can we better leverage public-private partnerships in emerging technologies more broadly to ensure that the U.S. remains a leader in innovation?
We can, Senator, yes. I think both in the world of AI and in quantum, we've seen examples where AI centers, both from NSF and DOE, have shown the opportunity where the private sector can come in and work with academia and government together to do the important basic R&D and then ultimately be able to translate that into use cases for the commercial sector. So I think we need to continue to look at those opportunities and do more of that.
I'll move on to biotechnology briefly. Mr. Kratsios, I've chaired for the last roughly 18 months a National Security Commission on Emerging Biotech. We will produce our final report for members of Congress in the next couple of months, and I've come to learn how important this technology will be to our national security and our economic vigor for the next generation and beyond. If confirmed, how will we ensure the U.S. is prepared to take advantage of this key platform technology?
Yeah, similar to other emerging technologies, the way that you can achieve U.S. leadership is through a whole-of-government approach that is able to leverage the strengths of individual agencies and how they can plug into the larger strategy. And I think just like we've seen with AI and quantum, you need coordination between agencies like DOE and National Science Foundation and Commerce, and even agencies like DOD that ultimately use this technology. And I think the same will go with biotech.
More specifically, what role will our ability to produce, gather, and put in readable format biological data play in our staying ahead of the competition?
I think it's very critical. If we look at some of the largest players in China, I think their sole mission is to hoover up as much of that as possible. And I think the U.S. needs to be in a position to prioritize and think about the value of this genetic data.
One final thing for Mr. Meador, non-compete reform has been a priority of mine. I think that non-competition agreements are overbroad, they're overutilized, and there are better instruments existing under labor law to deal with the stated concerns of employers. This is an impediment to upward mobility and so forth. I think Ms. Khan acted illegally. The courts vindicated my view as it relates to this policy issue, but I think on the substance, directionally, they were headed in the right direction. Do you have any plans as it relates to non-compete reform? And can you assure me that you'll work with this committee if you start to rulemaking as it pertains to this issue?
Yes, Senator, thank you. I share your concerns with regard to non-competes. I agree they've been overused and abused. And I won't comment on the legal status of the rulemaking since I know that's subject to litigation. But I can say there's a lot more the FTC can do, including through competition enforcement actions. And I think that would be a good next step for the agency to take, is to investigate how we can use our traditional enforcement powers to address those harms.
Fantastic. I look forward to working with you on that should you be confirmed. Can we work together?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Chairman?
Thank you. Ranking Member Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again to both of the nominees and your willingness to serve and your families. And your kids have been camped out there in the ante room having a good time, but they said that they can't wait to hear you answer more questions. So, Mr. Metter, on 13B, you know, we've had the FTC commissioners before us. I almost think you almost could get to a resolution before we could get to a resolution, but you agreed the importance of having 13B for consumers?
Yes, Senator, I think it's incredibly important that the Federal Trade Commission have the ability to return money to consumers who have been harmed.
Right. So do you have any thoughts about how to come to an agreement on restoration of that authority?
I would defer to this committee and Congress as a whole as to how best to navigate that. But if confirmed, I'm ready and willing to consult and assist with your office or any others to figure out how we can make that happen as quickly as possible.
But you see that refunds are part of that?
Yes, I believe when we have consumers who have been harmed by unfair or deceptive practices, one of the best things the FTC can do is get the money back to the consumers.
So, but refunds writ large are a good way of preventing anti-competitive behavior.
They can certainly be a tool. I think, you know, everything is obviously fact-specific. It depends on the case. But if confirmed, I look forward to working with the staff to examine what's been effective in the past and what we would want to do in the future.
Okay, thank you. And then I know you got a question from one of my colleagues on PBMs, but Senator Grassley and I have reintroduced our PBM bill that is about outlawing spread pricing and clawback actions by PBMs. Do you have thoughts about that?
I can say I enjoyed working with Senator Grassley's staff on the Judiciary Committee on many of these same issues. And if confirmed, I would really appreciate consulting with your office and others to talk about what the best legislative solution could be in this industry.
But do you think that that's, you know, I like this anti-manipulation authority. I've given anti-manipulation authority to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I gave it to the Commodities Future Trading Commission. They both have established a very aggressive oversight of very anti-competitive and manipulative practices. In fact, both agencies have gotten billions of dollars in fines against companies. The FTC hasn't done so much here. But Senator Grassley felt very specific about saying these types of practices are illegal. You don't have any problem saying that.
I would want to see the final report for the 6B study that's currently pending before the commission. I think that's the first step we have to take. I've been looking at PBM since I was in law school, writing about them. I'm familiar with a lot of the concerns in the industry. I also know things have changed a lot since then. So I think it's important we understand what's happening in the marketplace today, and then we'll know what's
well, there could be good actors who basically do get you a discount, but if somebody goes to a large employer and says, I'll get you a 35% discount, and then they pocket 30% of it at the PBM and only give the company and the workers 5%, that doesn't seem like a fair way to do business. Okay, I have to ask your seatmate there, Mr. Kratsios, about technology. I'm sure people talked about test beds while I was gone. You believe that that's a vital role that we play at the federal level when, you know, aviation or quantum or, you know, somebody can't do the scale at which an industry needs to get an answer.
Yes, test beds have served a very important purpose for a wide variety of technologies. NIST, for example, has a lot of experience in building test beds as well.
And so where do you fall? I love that Senator Lee was here as well as Senator Hagerty, because they both, well, one comes from a very benefited DOE state, and the other one is chairing now the Energy Committee. And these are initiatives oftentimes on the test bed side that are at DOE or at NSF. Mm-hmm. What is your thoughts about the President's NSF comments, and how do you think these two agencies fill that role of doing that test bed work?
I think both NSF and DOE have proven with the CHIPS Act implementation and with work that was done even before that for both AI and quantum centers, there's great opportunity to leverage those two agencies with their rich history of funding and creating and organizing user facilities to be places where a lot of these very important test beds can reside for the communities.
So you want to speak loudly about how robust that is. Is that correct? I want to make sure I get the characterization. I don't want to, you say this and then I'll find out, oh yeah, go ahead. Take a meat cleaver to NSF.
I think it's critically important that through an interagency process that OSTP is able to relay the importance of the scientific and technological community to the larger discussion and ultimately to the decision of the president. And I commit to bring to bear the science and technology advice to those conversations.
Okay, that sounded more like a politician than a science guy, but okay. What about spectrum? Do you think that we could use a little test bedding on the spectrum technology to help us really move ahead of our competitors here and really get the solution for the future?
I do. I think it's important to do kind of advanced spectrum testing. When I served as acting Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, we did some work around 5G test beds at some of our military bases. And why that was sort of an interesting opportunity was that some of the regulations around approvals for these types of tests were much easier when they were done on military facilities. So I think across all emerging technologies, I think we have to be innovative and thoughtful on how to be able to make sure that the U.S. is continually leading on these technologies.
Thank you. I'll have more questions for the record on that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Cantwell, and welcome. We are delighted that you all are here, and congratulations on your nominations. Mr. Kratsios, I know that Senator Lujan asked you about the quantum initiative and getting that back in gear. I want you, for the record, just to talk about what you can do in this position as, if confirmed, to really advance quantum. In Tennessee, this is something that's important. Chattanooga and the electric powered board there. They're working to commercialize the first open available, commercially available quantum network. So I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, so OSTP plays a special role in quantum, and that is the home for the National Quantum Coordination Office, and it is essentially the focal point for the larger interagency on how sort of quantum policy is run for the federal government. I think for me, we have an incredible opportunity before us in this Congress to reauthorize the National Quantum Initiative. I think there's important work to be done on the way that sort of a lot of the very great and vital basic research that's done on quantum is ultimately translated into things that can actually benefit the American people through use cases. The other thing that I think we also need to always...
Test beds for near-term applications?
Yes, test beds are a great opportunity and a place where that translation can happen. I think the closer that we can get sort of commercial operators to the folks who are doing the basic R&D and actually accelerating that lab to market, I think is very important. And I think a lot of the centers have been set up both at NSF and at DOE can serve that opportunity.
Let me ask you about standard setting. This is something Senator Warner and I have talked a good bit about. We're concerned about China's aggression, as whether it's the WRC or whether it is any number of other applications. And we're trying to encourage U.S. leadership in that regard. And is that on your radar? Are you watching that?
It is, yes. I think whenever I think of a comprehensive strategy for an emerging technology, how the U.S. is able to posture globally to be the ones who are the standard setters in the standard setting process is important. In the 2019 executive order, the president called on NIST to drive these types of standard setting initiatives on AI globally. And I think the same important work can and should be done in quantum.
Okay, and hypersonics? You know, in Tennessee, we've got the only place where hypersonics testing can be done. And we know Russia and China, North Korea is over meddling with hypersonic technology. So tell me what you're looking at there.
Yeah, so hypersonics are a critical technology that the DoD and the U.S. must lead on. In the first Trump administration, a very large sort of policy decision was made to refocus a big and significant portion of the research engineering budget towards hypersonics efforts, and I think those continue. And I think it's incumbent on sort of our larger defense tech ecosystem to continue to drive on hypersonics.
Okay, and Mr. Metter, we look forward to seeing you go to the FTC. The BOTS Act is something that was passed in 2016, and the FTC has taken up only one case in the BOTS Act. Enforcement on that is necessary. It's important to our Tennessee entertainers and indeed anybody with a live venue. So have you looked at that issue?
Somewhat, yes, Senator. I think it is incredibly important. I've been active in the ticketing space and ensuring that we have competitive markets that are free from interference by unfair and deceptive practices. And so if confirmed, I look forward to working with the commission and staff to make sure we enforce that law fully.
Okay, and children in the virtual space. We've got some young attendees here today. And of course, protecting children in the virtual space is terribly important. The Kids Online Safety Act, we've tried to get that passed. We've done well with it in the Senate. We are working with our friends over in the House who just couldn't seem to get there to protect kids. So I would hope that you will work with us as we try to get this legislation passed and own the books.
Yes, Senator. I care personally very much about this topic, and I would be happy to be a resource and work with your office.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations. We appreciate that you all are here. Senator Markey, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, very much. In 1998, I authored the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which is still the only federal privacy legislation to protect young people online. Mr. Medor, in our meeting yesterday, you acknowledged that you were not that familiar with COPPA. If confirmed, can you commit to quickly getting up to speed on that law?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to it.
And if confirmed, will you commit to strictly enforcing the Federal Trade Commission's COPPA rules?
Yes, Senator, I think it's important for the FTC to strictly enforce all the authorities Congress has given it.
Good, thank you. And while the original COPPA has been a major success, it's past time we updated COPPA's protections to account for new predatory practices online. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in 2023, 1 in 4 teenage girls seriously considered suicide, 1 in 8 teenage girls attempted suicide, and 1 in 5 LGBTQ youth high school students attempted suicide. And that's why for over a decade I've been fighting to modernize COPPA to protect teenagers from targeted ads that promote content related to eating disorders, amongst other things. Mr. Medar, do you agree that Congress should protect children and teens' online privacy?
Senator, I think protecting children is one of the most important missions for both the FTC and Congress, and would love to work with your office on that.
And I'm glad to hear that, because we do need to address the pervasive tracking and targeting of young people, and we do need COPPA 2.0 to become the law in the country. Now I want to turn to the baseless claim that big tech has unfairly censored conservatives. Mr. Medor, when we met yesterday, you said that you needed to learn more information about the issue and would follow the facts. But when Chairman Cruz asked earlier this morning whether you agree that, quote, big tech censorship poses the greatest threat to free speech and free and fair elections in this country, you said you agreed. So that answer is inconsistent with our conversation yesterday. So let's be completely clear. Do you believe that big tech has censored conservative speech?
Senator, thank you for that question. So I would make a distinction between sharing the concern about the behavior of big tech and how they conduct their online platforms, and whether or not that conduct amounts to a specific violation of the FTC Act. And so when we were speaking yesterday, that's how I view that discussion, is how would I look at the question of whether any specific action by an online platform violates one of the provisions of the FTC Act. That's something that I don't want to prejudge. I'd have to look at it at a case-by-case basis, comparing the facts to the law. I'm glad that the FTC has taken the first step to start collecting that information so we can assess that important question. But I do share the overarching concern about how content moderation has been implemented by many online platforms.
Well, again, that's not the answer, in my opinion, that you gave to Senator Cruz today. Last week, the Federal Trade Commission began collecting comments on whether the platforms have censored users based on their speech, and this action is clearly designed to intimidate the platforms to adopt speech policies that promote conservatives. Mr. Medor, is it the FTC's responsibility to ensure that the platform's content moderation rules support conservative viewpoints?
Senator, I believe it is the FTC's responsibility solely to enforce the laws that Congress has given it.
Okay, well, many people like myself strongly believe that the platforms did not improperly censor conservatives. In fact, a peer-reviewed study from last year found that while conservatives were suspended more often on Twitter, they were also much more likely to share misinformation. And Madam Chair, I would like to include that study in the record without objection.
Without objection.
Mr. Meadow, will you commit to objectively following the facts in any of these conspiratorial fishing expeditions into censorship of conservatives?
Senator, I commit to fairly looking at the facts in every case that would come before me if I'm confirmed as a commissioner.
Well, I remain deeply concerned because your comments earlier today suggest that you have already come to a conclusion on this issue. Chairman Ferguson has made similar comments. Mr. Medor, if the FTC Korea staff conclude that no further investigation or enforcement action is warranted against the big tech platforms for supposedly censoring conservatives, will you commit to following that recommendation?
Senator, I can commit to closely examining the evidence collected by staff along with their recommendations and consulting with my fellow commissioners if confirmed to ensure that we're reaching the right decision based on the facts and the law.
Well, that's deeply disappointing because, in my opinion, objectively looking at it, the staff will come to a conclusion that there has been no censorship. But my fear is, of course, is that President Trump is clearly trying to turn the FTC into the Federal Truth Commission, and I think that's going to be very, very damaging to our country. So I'm going to be watching very closely, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this time.
Thank you. Senator Schmidt.
Well, that's interesting because as Attorney General of Missouri, I filed the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit that uncovered the vast censorship enterprise. So the idea that there wasn't censorship is nonsense, total nonsense. We saw the weaponization of the whole of government against political opponents because they dared to dispute the efficacy of masks or had concerns about the vaccine. The idea that there wasn't censorship does a real disservice, I think, the worst abuse of the First Amendment we have ever seen in the United States of America. So I hope you continue to look at this because I think we've just scratched the surface. And it's the idea the Federal Truth Commission. How about the Disinformation Governance Board that was established under President Biden? This is Orwellian stuff. So the FTC is right. I think glad that the leadership has been shown to sort of open up and find out what other examples exist, because there's no way we're effectively going to deal with this until we admit that there was a problem. And my friend from the other side who just made the statement is just totally ignorant of the facts. And by the way, who decides the truth? Like, the government doesn't. People get to decide that, and you only get to do that in a free and open society where people have the ability to speak their minds. And so I guess, Mr. Meadow, I want to ask you this question then, I guess. What other steps can be done to ensure that people can speak their minds? I know we talk about the coordination between the government and big tech. That's certainly a thing because that is a direct violation of the First Amendment. But I know that you've got a couple of different buckets, whether it's violating terms of service, or violating the core tenets of Section 230 protections. How do you view this and the role the FTC has?
Thank you, Senator. So I think there are two avenues through which the FTC could potentially address this kind of conduct. There's the antitrust laws. So if you have competitors colluding on content moderation standards, that could potentially amount to a violation of the antitrust laws. And on the consumer protection side, if the application of terms of service or other promises made by a platform end up being deceptive in some way to consumers, you could potentially have a concern there under the FTC Act.
And I think what Europe has really messed up on AI is it's been over-regulated, and they're sort of pushing a political bias, which is I think, demolished Europe's chances at being a leader in this, which I guess that's good for us. But how do we avoid that? How do we avoid woke AI? How do we avoid Black George Washington? Like, what do we do to make sure that this doesn't become the next frontier for this level of censorship with quantum chips at fueling it?
Yes, I think the best thing the FTC can do within its remit is to fully enforce the competition laws to ensure that markets are not unduly concentrated or dominated by a single actor and that consumers have choice. Ultimately, I think we can trust that the market will work if we give it a chance, but that means we have to maintain competition so that consumers can take their business elsewhere if they're unhappy with the services they've received.
Thank you. Mr. Kratsios, thank you for your willingness to serve as well. Highly qualified. I've respected you for years. We've gotten to know each other. The president's announced a national initiative to drive innovation, like the American AI Initiative. David Sachs is a great pick to be helping with a lot of this stuff, and the National Quantum Initiative. How do you view your role in making sure those programs are successful, those initiatives are successful?
Yeah, the Office of Science Technology Policy has the role in the White House to coordinate these efforts across the federal government. So whether you're driving a national strategy on artificial intelligence or on quantum information science, all a wide variety of agencies that all have a very important role to play, from basic research funding at the National Science Foundation to more applications work at some of our DOE labs to some standards related work at NIST, and where OSTB plays a more critical role as being the convener and the coordinator for these efforts across the government. And that's what we did in 45 with a variety of emerging techs, and we hope to do again in 47.
What do you think the biggest challenge is right now for the United States to be the leader? And AI gets thrown around, sort of broadly, but to be the leader in kind of innovation and obviously DeepSeek is a wake-up call. I mean, there's no way they did it for $6 million, but the fact is, I think our assumptions about how far ahead we were have been shattered to some degree, right? So this is a very serious race we have with China. What do you think our biggest obstacle is to continuing to be the leader?
I think our biggest obstacle is effectively pursuing a promote and protect strategy. So you can have and institute a set of export controls, for example, around high-end chips, but if you're not successfully enforcing those export controls and not actually limiting the access of bad actors in the PRC from accessing those chips, you're not actually protecting well. And the same goes on the promote side. You can encourage the research and development and translational research in these emerging tech fields, but if you're not effectively allocating those dollars to the biggest and hardest problems in those fields, you're not actually moving the ball forward. So I think the strategy is there. I think you just have to effectively execute on the two sides of that coin of promote and protect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Congratulations to both of you. I think I'll just start with one question of you, Mr. Kratsios. In your testimony, you mentioned helping to double R&D spending during President Trump's first administration. You've already seen this administration attempt to gut funding for many important research agencies, including NIH. If confirmed, will you commit to funding research and development at levels authorized by Congress?
I'll have to coordinate with the president and with OMB, obviously, on budgets, but my commitment is to bring to the table and bring to those conversations the importance of research and development in these emerging technologies.
Right, and do you agree that domestic semiconductor production should continue to be a priority for the U.S.?
Absolutely. We have to be able to produce high-end chips here in the U.S.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Meador, I work closely with you, with my staff, I know, did on antitrust and competition issues during your time in Senator Lee's office. And I hope, if confirmed, you will continue to work in a bipartisan manner as you did there. Today, the Commission is litigating antitrust cases against Meta, Amazon, John Deere, pesticide manufacturer, medical provider, many others. Will you commit to continuing to prosecute the antitrust cases currently at the Commission and to pursue remedies that will protect consumers from anti-competitive conduct?
Thank you, Senator. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
So while I can't commit to any specific action, obviously I share the concerns that the agency is seeking to address. I think it has a lot of important work on its docket, and I can commit to taking that very seriously if confirmed to ensure we're doing everything we can to enforce the law.
Thank you. Appreciate that. You've written that it's long past time for our government to finish what they've started, break up Live Nation Ticketmaster, and bring real competition back to the live event ecosystem. While you work for Senator Lee, I teamed up with him, as you know, to hold a rather memorable hearing. Senator Cruz was there in judiciary on Ticketmaster Live Nation, monopoly over venues, artist promotion, online ticketing. While the Justice Department, I know you're aware of this, is litigating that case, can you elaborate why it is so important to take on monopolies like Live Nation Ticketmaster, and how will that experience help you at the FTC?
Absolutely. So in that case, we have an industry that has many parts and sort of a vertical chain. And what we've seen is that combining all of them into one firm has allowed them to engage in what's called foreclosure in many instances. So when one company controls both the primary ticketing service that artists use and venues use, as well as the actual venues themselves, it gives them the ability to lock up the entire industry, which ultimately raises prices for consumers, reduces the quality of their experience at these events, deprives artists of the money that they would have otherwise earned. And it just leads to a worse ecosystem overall. And so if confirmed to this position, I would take those concerns from that industry and be on the lookout for similar situations in other industries to make sure that if one firm is seeking to dominate an entire industry, it's not doing so to the detriment of consumers.
Okay, very good. FTC independence, I know that Senator Lujan asked you some questions along this lines, but do you agree that the sole focus of the FTC should be to protect consumers from unfair methods of competition and deceptive practices, which is clearly in their act setting them up, without concern for political pressures from the White House?
Yes, with the one caveat that we have about 80 statutes we enforce total, and so
That's what I thought. I actually, as I asked the question, I thought that might be a very smart answer on your behalf. As you know, I work with Senator Grassley to update corporate merger fees for the first time in 20 years, to give our antitrust agencies more resources to hire attorneys and economists. In the end, Senator Lee and I coordinated on his bill on the tech cases, allowing the state AGs to keep them in their jurisdictions, which was a Lee Klobuchar bill, thank you, as well as this bill that I had with Grassley, both passed. Do you agree that to take on some of the biggest companies in the history of the world, that the FTC must be funded and staffed with the best people possible?
Yes, Senator, I think it's obviously important for the FTC to have everything it needs, and I was honored to work with your office on that legislation and create the possibility of antitrust enforcement that's self-funded without burdening taxpayers.
Okay. How will you work with state AGs? There's a lot of action going on in the states right now to enforce antitrust and consumer protection laws.
I think that's one of the unique things about American antitrust that I really appreciate is the multiple levels of enforcement that we have, including private suits, federal suits, but also state AGs. And I know the FTC has a long history of working productively with state AGs, and if confirmed, I would look forward to continuing those relationships.
All right, thank you. I want to thank both of you for actually answering the questions and doing it in a short period of time and not filibustering. So that was actually miraculous. Thank you. And if we have any other questions, I'll put them on the record. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr.
Recognized for a filibuster.
Thank you. I'm new. I haven't quite learned the skills of just talking endlessly about nothing, but I'm sure it will come naturally as time goes on. In that vein, Mr.
Given that you sold cars, I don't believe you.
Oh, you know what?
Well, I did not say that.
I was trying to improve my life status from car dealer, and I went backwards with politician. If I get my law degree, I'm toast. But anyway, Mr. Meador, back to you, who is a lawyer, so I mean that in the nicest way possible. Thank you for agreeing to serve again in this administration. If you were to describe your job to a 13-year-old, is that right? How would you describe your job?
Senator, I believe my job is to make the lives of American families better. And that is primarily through protecting the markets that they rely upon to put food on the table, to get health care for their children, and just to go about their daily business. And that includes competitive markets so that they have options that are affordable and high quality, and that in the midst of trying to provide for their families, they aren't deprived of their wealth or security through scams and other fraudulent behavior.
And as you think about this job that you're about to undertake, what would be your top 1 or 2 priorities?
Senator, I'm focused on the kitchen table issues, again, going to those things that affect the average person on a daily basis, making sure that they have competitive markets that provide affordable housing, energy, healthcare, food. All of those, I think, should be top of mind for the FTC.
That's great. And having your fellow commissioners here to support you shows that the agency really should be free of politics and should be somebody that does the right thing. So I appreciate your willingness to serve. Mr. Kratsios, I appreciate you being here and your willingness to serve. I also applaud your parents being here. As you know, I'm a first-generation immigrant myself from Colombia, South America. So we know the Spanish Empire was the greatest empire, not the Greek Empire. But appreciate you being here. I'm sure your parents are extremely proud of you, serving once and now doing it again. I just want to remind my Democrat colleagues that you were unanimously confirmed, and to keep that in mind despite their tendencies to want to be partisan. You're taking on a big job, report directly to the President of the United States. It'll be great to have a President of the United States who understands artificial intelligence and not somebody who actually needed it injected into his brain. So that's a step up from the previous administration. And in the previous administration, the person who had your job talked a lot about electrifying America. What is your thoughts on this idea that everybody should have electric stoves, everybody should have electric cars, and there's only one size fits all? Is that based on science in your mind?
I think to solve the energy problems of this country, we have to take an all-the-above energy approach, and electricity is obviously one part of it, but there's a whole lot more there. And I look forward to working with the President's Energy Dominance Council to make sure that's a reality.
So forcing everybody to drive electric cars even though they don't want it seems like probably not science-based or practical.
No, the government should not be forcing anyone to drive a particular type of vehicle.
That's good to hear. In California, maybe they haven't quite heard that memo. But speaking of California, objectively a pretty state run by terrible people, would you think that California should set standards for the rest of the country? Meaning, do you think it's up to California to decide what kind of cars people in Ohio should buy?
I'm not very familiar with how the policy around that works, but I think in principle that probably is something that should be looked at and more carefully.
Yeah, I would think my colleagues would want to have the federal government set even standards for the entire country and not have one state or another. That makes sense, right? We do regulate interstate commerce here in the federal government. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that in the technology policy domain around issues like privacy. When if there's an inability to create a federal privacy law, you end up having a patchwork sort of created by states, and that ultimately is doesn't do the best thing for industry or for consumers.
And do you think it's also important that business gets certainty for as long a horizon as humanly possible, and not think about a policy that lasts for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, but rather over maybe a decade?
Yes, I think regulatory certainty is a big driver on encouraging investment, particularly in science and technology. So I do believe that, yes.
And we should be, I think you would agree, we should be the leaders. I mean, this is the country that innovation is born here. That we should be the leaders not only in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, blockchain technology, the human-machine interaction. These are all the things that are ahead of us. And how do you see government's role in that? Like, what do you see philosophically the role of the government making that happen?
Yeah, so I think the government plays essentially, I think, a role in 4 categories. The first is on early stage basic competitive R&D. So this is investing federal dollars in areas where the private sector is not incentivized to do yet. And we've been doing that for 50 or 60 years. We need to keep doing that. The second piece is around regulations. And the way I usually think about it is removing barriers to innovation. So finding ways that you can actually unlock the potential of these technologies and allow them to flourish and not have regulations get in the way. The fourth is through workforce programs. So it's critical that both we have individuals who are able to actually become the next great scientists and technologists to make these discoveries, and also prepare American workers to wield these technologies in their daily life. And the fourth is around international engagement. We as a government need to make sure that we're partnering with our allies on using these technologies globally and pushing back on actions like the ones that the CCP take to try to push their technology globally.
Well, that's a fantastic answer. Great job. Look forward to having both of you unanimously confirmed, getting you in office, and most importantly, having you visit the greatest state in America, Ohio.
Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Mador, I think I'd like to start with you, just to be able to build on some of the conversation that's happened here. FTC has a particular structure in terms of its leadership. It's one that has the bipartisan tradition in that way. I guess I just wanted to ask you, do you see benefit in that type of structure and that type of bipartisan nature of FTC?
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, my experience, both as an attorney at FTC and as a practitioner appearing before it, is that the consensus building that took place at FTC always made its enforcement action stronger.
Yeah. I guess I just kind of raised that because, I know there was some talk about the independence of FTC and why I think it's so important that we ensure that because, there is a sense of credibility, right? Like I would imagine you believe that for FTC, for its rulings to be considered, for it to have the kind of resonance with the American people, about a sense of fairness, that credibility is critical for FTC to be able to function. Is that right?
Absolutely, Senator.
Yeah. So I just, as we kind of proceed on this, I know there's lots of politics swirling around, but you and I had a really good conversation talking through some critical issues, like, for instance, about the role of FTC when it comes to big tech. And I would believe that for FTC to make decisions that are potentially going to be controversial around big tech, it's important, right, that it be seen as being done from a sense of what's right for the American people and a sense of fairness rather than something that's political or something that's associated with a political donor or a special interest group. Is that right?
So, Senator, the way I would view my job, if confirmed, is to show up each day working to serve the American people and enforcing the law the way that it has been written. And while I can't speak for the other commissioners, I'm confident that they share that view as well.
I hope so. And I think that that's something that, again, for the majority of people watching, I talked to people in New Jersey about this, they don't necessarily fully understand the debate about independence of different agencies. I think that's much more of a DC, world view in that way, but they do understand fairness. And they do understand a sense of whether or not their interests are being put forward. So I ask, if you're confirmed, that you keep that in mind, about this. And if the FTC loses that sense of credibility, if it's seen as a political entity that is carrying out actions based off of whoever, which party is in control, I do think that it just very much will undermine the capacity for the FTC to be able to engage.
Thank you.
Mr. Kratsios, I wanted to ask you some questions here. I've heard you speak on this from a couple different angles, but I guess I just wanted to ask kind of directly, do you think we as a nation are spending enough on basic science research?
I think over the years, since I guess the 1950s and since sort of NSF was initially created, the amount of federally funded R&D has continued to generally increase. And I think it's been critically important to the way that we've been able to sort of make these discoveries. I think what's changed a lot over the years is the contribution that the private sector makes to the larger R&D ecosystem. I think right around the time of World War II, the percentage of R&D that the federal government was funding was more than 50%. And that's changed dramatically. And I think that's actually a good thing for the country. We're actually seeing some of the greatest innovations coming from the private sector.
But do you think that just overall spending, not just government spending, but private sector included, academia, like where are we? I keep hearing a lot about China increasing their basic science research funding upwards of double digits. We are obviously not keeping pace with that trajectory. Does that concern you in terms of overall spending?
I think as someone who is deeply obsessed with American leadership in science and technology, I do believe that as an economy, continuing to invest in this critical R&D kind of across the board is beneficial to the country.
So right now, the foundation of it, as you said, government, private sector, sort of the largest amount of government's been decreasing in terms of total percentage. I think it's right around 40% government funding right now, 37% private sector. Does that seem fair to you? Is that sort of a right level? I'm trying to think through and understand your calibration here in terms of what you'd like to see and whether or not you think the private sector should take over more of what the government does when it comes to basic science research.
Yeah, I think what's amazing about the U.S. ecosystem is that a lot of these changes are driven by what I spoke about in my opening statement, this free market approach to scientific discovery in the U.S. I think the challenges and I think the problems with a sort of authoritarian or CCP type approach to science funding is that you end up having over-allocation to the wrong things and under-allocation to the right things, and thinking that you can sort of be God for the day and make sure that you allocate things to the right places, I think is a mistake. And I think in the U.S., the reason why we do have the greatest chips in the world and the greatest algorithms in the world and the greatest applications in the world is because we go back to that free market approach to innovation.
I don't discount that, and I'll yield back to the chair in a second. But when you listed through in your opening statement, splitting the atom and getting a man to the moon, the transistor and the creation of the microchips, I mean, so much of that was based off of government research funding or government acquisition when microchips early on. So I just say, look, there's certainly models in that direction, but I do think that we need to be careful about moving too much towards one that's just solely based off of profitability. And with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Senator Peters.
Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to both of you on your nominations. Mr. Mader, regardless of your own accomplishments and qualifications, I want to follow up on a question that Senator Kim asked, and that deals with the independence of the commission, because I'm deeply concerned that the situation that you're entering into, if confirmed in this position, from my viewpoint, the FTC appears to be at the center of a broader effort by President Trump to further consolidate his own power and disrupt literally nearly a century of precedent regarding the role of independent executive branch agencies. So my question for you is pretty straightforward, following up on Senator Kim's comments. Do you agree with the DOJ's position announced earlier this month that it now believes the for-cause removal protections applicable to independent commissions are unconstitutional?
Thank you, Senator. So I will defer to the Department of Justice and the White House on the legal positions. FTC is involved in litigation involving this question right now as well that it'd be inappropriate for me to comment on. What I can speak to are my own intentions, should I be confirmed, which is to show up each day to enforce the law, to serve the American people without fear or favor with respect to any party.
So if confirmed and a motion comes up after your confirmation that aligns the FTC position on the matter that the Trump administration, which is trying to basically neuter the independent status of these agencies, what side would you fall on?
Senator, I wouldn't be able to commit to how I would vote on any matter that might come before me as a commissioner.
Well, I'm still very concerned about what's happening here, and I would hope commissioners understand the importance of independence, something that has been happening for many, many years, decades, that this is a dangerous course. I know it's part of this unitary executive philosophy. Folks want to know what a unitary executive is. Think of Putin, for example. That's a unitary executive. That's the direction that we're going, unfortunately. Mr. Graziosi, you previously worked on President Trump's AI executive order in 2020, which, among other things, required agencies to publish AI use cases and ensured that agencies protected privacy, civil rights, as well as civil liberties. So my question for you is, do you still agree with that Trump executive order that agencies should publish use case inventories that use their AI uses to protect privacy, civil rights, as well as civil liberties?
I do believe that the AI inventories that were started under the first Trump administration are very important, and the Biden administration continued those. For both the White House and more broadly for other agencies and American people to see what these use cases are and how the government is using AI, I think is very valuable. I think one tweak or something to think about with those is that AI is becoming more and more pervasive across everything that we do as Americans and everything that individual people and civil servants do across government. So I think maybe one way to a more valuable sort of list going forward, maybe some categorization of high impact use cases, because so you're not inundated with the next co-pilot that's being used in a browser, for example.
Certainly, all those should be protected, but obviously there are different risk levels. So that's what you're saying, make sure that we have a category of risk levels. The risk of an autonomous lethal weapon system is a whole lot different than a predictive maintenance for trucks. Is that what you're referring to?
I am, yeah, and I think for the purposes of of these inventories, I think impact is probably a better cut than risk. I think to me, I like impact of how is this particular AI application making a difference in the way that an agency is providing its services to citizens.
I'm also concerned about the brain drain that's occurring in federal science agencies. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency has fired, as you know, broad swaths of workers without, not on the basis of poor performance, basically indiscriminately, and sometimes without even knowing what those workers were responsible for, in the case of workers that were overseeing the nuclear arsenal, for example. These firings included scientists and experts at NASA, the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, and the National Institutes for Standards and Technology, or NIST. DOGE has also created a workplace environment where issue area experts are essentially being harassed with the explicit goal of getting them to resign. This environment is not conducive to ensuring the government can retain the top talent in science fields, which is essential for our competitive advantage, which we need for AI and space exploration, manufacturing, et cetera. So my question for you, sir, is do you agree that it is essential to retain top science and technology talent in the federal government to further success of the United States? And if so, how would you advise the president to reverse course in these policies that are actually having these folks with very specialized and important talent being fired?
I do believe that it's important for all of our science technology agencies to have high-skilled technical and scientific folks there to do the very important work for the American people. I also think it's entirely reasonable for a new president to be able to evaluate the team that he has on the field across his agencies and sort of make the necessary changes to ensure that he can achieve the goals that he campaigned on and won.
Well, the key word there is to evaluate. There's no evidence that there was any evaluation going on. It was indiscriminate across the board. In fact, the thing that really caught me is that because it's probationary employees that are new ones, it was basically people who were promoted. So they were outstanding performers. They got promoted to a different job, and now that's probationary. So we actually fired people who just got promoted because of their outstanding work. Congratulations, you did a great job. You're now fired. I don't think that works in any business. I hope you would step up and say that doesn't work in the science enterprise as well. Yes or no?
Oh, yes, if I'm involved in any of this in the future, I certainly will bring to bear the importance of science and technological advice at all these agencies.
Very good.
Okay, I'm now going to recognize Senator Rosen, and I'm going to entrust the gavel to Senator Rosen while I run to vote. And I'm going to have trust and confidence that in my absence, she's not going to seek unanimous consent to dissolve the White House or the Department of Commerce or something else.
I will not. Maybe I'll just declare my birthday a holiday or something. There you go.
Knock yourself out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for the nominees, your families, for being here today, for your willingness to serve. I'm going to talk a little bit about consumer prices, because over the past several years, Americans have seen skyrocketing prices for everything from groceries to housing. And in many sectors, consolidation, of course, has led to higher costs, less competition, and often no choice for consumers of where to shop. And that's why last year I pushed the FTC to sue to block the Kroger-Albertsons grocery store merger, the mega merger that would have eliminated good-paying jobs and led to even higher food prices in my home state of Nevada and across the country. So, Mr. Meador, if confirmed, would you support actions by the FTC to block mergers up and down the grocery supply chain to prevent further price increases for Nevadans? And, of course, everybody in this country has to eat, no matter who you are, so I would say for everyone.
Thank you, Senator. I share those concerns. As a father of 6, I pay a lot of attention to our grocery bill, and I think it's an incredibly important topic. And yes, I can commit that if confirmed, I'll do everything I can to ensure that we're enforcing competition up and down the grocery supply chain.
And would you take action to review whether bad actors are taking advantage of the current supply chain issues? We know that there's dire egg shortages. We want to be sure that people aren't price gouging. And so will you commit to working on that as well?
Yes, Senator, I'd be happy to help the staff and commissioners look into those issues.
And another thing, we're talking about AI and, of course, surveillance pricing. It's a new strategy where companies use personal data to change prices in real time for individual consumers. And so this presents clear opportunities for discrimination and for price gouging, as the goal of surveillance pricing is to offer the highest price to the specific customer who's willing to pay. For example, a new mom shopping for diapers, seniors for over-the-counter medication, or construction workers, well, in Las Vegas, it's pretty hot out there, and Gatorade on a hot, sunny day. And so as the new FTC chair recently withdrew the request for comments that the commission had open on surveillance pricing. He closed it nearly 3 months early. I'm concerned that this signals a lack of concern about rising consumer prices and the FTC's mandate to protect Americans from these discriminatory practices. So again, would you commit to support publishing the comments received under the FTC's RFI and surveilling pricing and support the publication of those findings? I think this is akin to price gouging in some ways, as they track you around and decide who's going to pay what depending who you are.
Thank you, Senator. I can commit, if confirmed, to working with the staff to get up to speed on this issue and understand what investigative efforts they've undertaken to look into it, getting up to speed on the record, and then working collaboratively with the commission to find the best path forward.
Because like I said, you're a father of 6, and I bet you buy a lot of cereal in your home, and you don't want to suddenly you go in and the price of cereal is double the price for, I'm an empty nester, double the price, or triple the price it is for me. And
we would be target number 1.
You'd be target number 1. I hope not. I hope not. Thank you. I want to move now to talking about DeepSeek and China. So, Mr. Kratsios, in your role as director of OSTP, you'll be required to develop and lead the nation's AI strategy. We've seen huge and alarming AI advancements in China with more efficient models like DeepSeek and investments in advanced data centers. But with this innovation comes serious threats. I'm concerned about the possibility of new AI platforms like DeepSeek being used to extract sensitive data from users. Additionally, DeepSeek is open source. The loopholes in its code could easily be copied into other platforms. I'm the only former computer programmer in the United States Senate. This can happen pretty darn easily. And recent reports also indicated DeepSeek unintentionally exposed sensitive data, including chat history on publicly accessible databases. So, Mr. Kratsios, how do you plan to collaborate with the private sector to ensure that our AI models have minimum security requirements, that they don't create a backdoor or allow public access to user data, to private data? And how should Congress be thinking about this challenge with respect to the models coming out of our adversary nations?
I think those are all excellent points, and I think it's critical, at least for the government, to be thinking very carefully on how to work with these individual model developers to think through some of these issues. I think a lot of them are very technical and scientific in nature, and one of the most important things that the federal government can do is support the measurement science necessary in order to be able to test and evaluate these models. And an agency like NIST is a great place to refine the measurement science around model evaluation. I think the CEO of Anthropic was here in the Senate just 2 years ago, and when he was discussing some of the challenges he's facing was that the technological methodologies necessary to actually evaluate these models still did not exist. And this is a great opportunity for standards-making agencies like NIST to do the appropriate work on how you measure these models, and then they can be tested for all the variety of things that you discussed.
Thank you. And before I close it out, I'm just going to say I hope you would agree that we need a highly technical and skilled workforce in order to do this and protect America. And I hope that you would support keeping the skilled workforce that you have and not supporting these willy-nilly cuts. Thank you.
Skilled workforce is absolutely critical. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
I was this close to the gavel, Mr. Chairman, this close. It was right here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Metter, welcome. On February 12, 2025, Acting Solicitor General Sarah Harris notified Senator Dick Durbin, the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, that the Department of Justice has determined that the statutory tenure protections for members of the FTC are unconstitutional. Chairman Ferguson also publicly stated his agreement with this position. I know Senator Lujan asked about FTC independence. Mr. Metter, do you believe that the president should be able to fire FTC commissioners at will?
Senator, I believe that Americans are concerned about high prices and the cost of living, and that the president is committed to improving their condition. I believe that's why I was nominated to this position, and what I can commit to is that if confirmed, that's what I will work to do every day, is to serve the American people by helping improve the cost of living and competitive markets and protecting them from unfair and deceptive practices.
That is good sucking up to the president, but you didn't answer my question.
Senator, I can't...
Do you believe that the President of the United States should be able to fire FTC commissioners at will? It's a simple question, yes or no?
It is a simple question that is subject to litigation in which the FTC is currently involved. I can't speak to that. What I can commit to and comment on is what I would do if confirmed, which again, Senator, would be to faithfully serve the American people.
If the president gave you an illegal order, would you carry it out?
Senator, what I would do if confirmed is show up every day to enforce the law.
If the president gave you an illegal order, would you carry it out? It's very simple or unconstitutional.
Senator, I would enforce the law without fear or favor.
So will you carry out an illegal order if President Trump gave you an illegal order to carry out?
I would enforce the law without fear or favor to any party.
So you're not answering me. Okay. Mr. Meador, do you believe the FTC has any independence from the president?
Senator, I think this falls under the same category we discussed a moment ago.
Okay, you're not being willing to answer. Mr. Meador, do you believe the president can zero out the FTC's budget without any action from Congress?
Senator, I believe that Congress has the power of the purse and works closely with the Congress, with the president, to determine funding for the executive.
Is the president allowed to zero out funding for the FTC?
Senator,
yes or no?
I've not looked into that question. I'm not aware of what the legal precedents are there.
Okay, I will submit the question for the record. Please respond to me within 30 days.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Over the past few years, I have worked closely with FTC on addressing shortages of infant formula, which have affected families across the country. Last year, the FTC issued its report on infant formula supply chain disruptions, which came after a multi-year investigation. Mr. Meador, would you commit to supporting investigations by the FTC that highlight markets where there has been a lack of competition, such as in the infant formula market?
Yes, Senator, I think it's important we focus our enforcement efforts where there are the most competitive harms. I would be very eager to work with staff to achieve that.
Thank you. Do you believe that the FTC has a role to play in investigating practices that may be increasing the cost of living for Americans?
Absolutely, where we have a reason to believe that those practices violate Section 5 of the FTC Act or another statute that we enforce, we should proceed with an investigation.
Okay. As you may know, Illinois has one of the strongest biometric privacy laws in the country, the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act. Many Americans are concerned about the use of their biometric data, like face and eye scans, fingerprints, or voice patterns, for unauthorized purposes. For example, in 2023, the FTC and DOJ charged Amazon with violating children's privacy laws by keeping children's voice data from Alexa recordings in order to make their AI smarter. In 2023, the FTC issued a commission policy statement about the use of biometric information. Mr. Meador, do you agree with the principles of that FTC statement, the commission policy statement about the use of biometric information?
Senator, I have not had an occasion to review that policy statement, but if confirmed, I would look forward to getting up to speed on those matters.
Will you report back to me?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. How would you, Mr. Meador, work with states like Illinois to protect biometric information?
So I think cooperation between the FTC and states is one of the most important things we can do. We do it a lot on the antitrust side. I think it could be benefit on the consumer protection side as well.
Just on background, for your information, the FTC's 2023 Commission Policy Statement about the use of biometric information raised significant concerns around the misuse of biometric data, such as discrimination against protected classes, AI applications like deepfakes, and unauthorized disclosure leaks of biometric data. So I hope you will keep that in mind. I'm going to yield back 24 seconds, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Meador.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both our nominees, Mr. Kratsios and Mr. Meador. My final question is required of all nominees. If confirmed, do you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee to provide thorough and timely responses to this committee's requests and to appear before this committee when requested?
I do.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have 17 various letters of support from multiple organizations for Mr. Kratsios' nomination and Mr. Meador's nomination that I ask unanimous consent to be inserted in the hearing record without objection, so ordered. Senators will have until the close of business on Thursday, February 27th to submit questions for the record. The nominees will have until the close of business on Monday, March 3rd to respond to those questions. That concludes today's hearing. Committee stands adjourned.